So today we're going to dive deep into how a community-based financial scheme in Washwood Heath, Birmingham just completely fell apart. And look, this isn't just a story about money. It's a story about trust, about betrayal, and really about how quickly a super tight-knit neighborhood can turn on its own people. Let's get right into it. And this quote, man, it just nails the whole vibe of the place. Washwood Heath is the kind of community where everybody knows everybody's business. Your reputation is everything, and a bit of gossip, it spreads like wildfire. It's this exact environment that let the scheme grow, and then, of course, led to its spectacular collapse. So, how did it all start to come undone? Well, you might think it would start with a big bang, but it didn't. The very first signs of trouble were actually quiet, almost sneaky. It all began with these angry whispers that started making the rounds, moving from living room chats to hushed phone calls, planting those first little seeds of doubt. Now, right in the middle of all this, you've got our main players, three young women, Rukhsar, Hamera, and Safiya, who were basically the faces of the operation on the street. And guiding them was their very charismatic mentor, Ghazala Din. In the beginning, they were all so confident, just brushing off the concerns they were hearing as nothing more than petty jealousy from the community. And this was the story Ghazala was spinning for them. She basically taught them to look at these early warning signs not as real problems, but just as envy from their neighbors. It was a really simple but honestly a powerful way to deflect any blame and to keep the girls totally loyal and on board. But, you can only brush things off for so long, right? Pretty soon, those quiet whispers turned into loud, direct confrontations. The pressure wasn't just some abstract thing anymore. It got real, it got personal, and it became absolutely impossible to ignore. I mean, listen to this. This is a direct quote from a phone call Safiya got from her own uncle. He'd invested £3,000, money he'd worked hard for driving his taxi. The sheer rage in his voice, that feeling of being played for a fool by his own family, this was one of the first major cracks in their whole story. But here's the thing, the pressure wasn't always loud and angry. For Rukhsar, it came in the form of silent judgment from her cousin Farah. There was no yelling, no big accusations, just this look of pure contempt that was, honestly, probably way more painful than any argument. It just became this constant, heavy emotional weight. And then for Humaira, the pressure came from her own best friend. I mean, can you imagine getting these texts day in and day out from someone who put their complete trust in you? The personal betrayals were just starting to pile up, and it really shows you how deep these connections went and how much damage was being done. So, with all this pressure coming from every direction, what was the game plan from the top? This is where we really get to see the cold, calculating mind of the ringleader, Ghazala Din, at work. She didn't panic. Nope. Instead, she handed out a literal script for deception. I mean, just look at this playbook. It's so methodical, it's almost clinical. This wasn't some desperate, panicked attempt to cover their tracks. No, this was a pre-planned system of manipulation. Bank delays, frozen accounts, even faking personal health issues. They were all just tools to be used and rotated to keep the victims confused and waiting. And here's the core logic behind the whole thing. It was never about actually convincing people. It was about keeping them in a constant state of hope. Ghazala knew, with chilling certainty, that as long as people believed they might just get their money back next week, they wouldn't organize, they wouldn't go to the police, they wouldn't fight back. It was a cynical but brutally effective strategy. But here's the thing about hope that's built on lies. It has an expiration date. And the big turning point came when all these isolated victims finally started talking to each other. Suddenly, those individual whispers combined into one massive, collective warning, and the community started to turn on the girls in a very, very public way. And this is how it all blew up. It was a single WhatsApp message, probably forwarded through dozens of community groups. The second people realized they were all being fed the exact same recycled excuses, the game was up. The deception was undeniable. In an instant, technology had exposed the whole pattern and united all the victims. And the fallout? Oh, it was immediate and it was brutal. Can you imagine walking into a wedding and the entire room just falls silent? Or being publicly screamed at in the street? They went from being these admired, successful women in the community to absolute outcasts, branded as thieves in hijabs. The social shunning was total. So the public shaming was one thing, and it was absolutely crushing. But the real emotional gut punch, the moment where it all became devastatingly human, that was still on its way. This is when all the excuses, all the delays, finally run out of road and just slam into raw human suffering. So I have to ask you, what do you think happens when a cold, calculated lie finally comes face to face with the real-world raw desperation of a victim who has literally lost everything? Well, this is what happens. A widow crying shows up on Humaira's doorstep. She hasn't just lost some savings, she pawned her wedding bangles to invest. Her children are hungry. This one incredibly powerful, heartbreaking confrontation just made all the financial harm painfully, undeniably real. It wasn't about numbers anymore, it was about the sound of a mother's desperation. After a moment like that, there's no going back. The full reality of the damage really started to sink in. The true cost of this betrayal wasn't just about the money lost. It was a deep, deep wound cut right into the very fabric of the Washwood Heath community. The damage was just everywhere. You had families that were completely fractured, cousins, sisters, all turning against each other. The local mosque, a place of worship, became a tense hotbed of gossip. The financial harm was real and devastating. We're talking pawned heirlooms, entire life savings gone. And of course, the girls themselves were totally cast out, becoming strangers in the only home they had ever known. And all of this leaves us with this one huge final question. You know, it's one thing to be scammed by some stranger on the internet, but when the betrayal comes from your neighbors, your friends, your own family, when it comes from inside the community, the path to healing is so much more complicated. How does a community even begin to rebuild that fundamental trust when it's been broken by its own?